On June 16th, the podcast First Person from the New York Times Opinion interviewed Will Estrada, the newly appointed head of parentalrights.org. Estrada talked to Lulu Garcia Novarro about his experience with homeschooling, his time at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and parental rights advocacy. What the episode did not touch on was the Christian right's vast influence on both the HSLDA and the parental rights movement. Will Estrada says that though his father was a public school teacher, his parents homeschooled him because, quote, he was even more so passionate about his faith. And one of the things that was very important to my parents was living out their faith as well, studying math, studying science, studying history, but also at the same time studying the Bible and studying scriptures, end quote. In our article, Exodus or Transformation, Dr. Clint Heacock explains the Christian right's use of homeschooling to further their dominionist agenda. Dr. Heacock describes R.J. Rushdoony's belief that, quote, Christian education and homeschooling was a necessary first step towards fulfilling God's kingdom on earth governed by biblical law, end quote. A theme repeated in the article is how homeschooling advocates equated leaving public schools for homeschooling as leaving Egypt for the promised lands. One such advocate was Mike Farris, the founder of HSLDA, who described homeschoolers as the Moses generation. In an article for PRA, senior research analyst Heron Greensmith describes the harms caused by HSLDA and Mike Farris and its mission, quote, to preserve and advance the fundamental, God-given, constitutional right of parents and others legally responsible for their children to direct their education, end quote. In first person, Estrada says, quote, I remember my parents saying things such as, if ever a social worker comes to the door or a truant officer comes to the door, just say, I have Fourth Amendment rights and Mike Farris is my lawyer, end quote. Mike Farris not only believed in using homeschooling as a way to spread a dominionist agenda, but also believed that homeschoolers will have to engage with the broader community. To that end, Farris created a Christian youth organization named Generation Joshua, quote, with the express aim of training generations of homeschool teens to get involved in the political process at a grassroots level, end quote. The Christian right didn't stop with introducing dominionism in homeschooling curricula, but eventually pushed for people with similar agendas to positions of authority in public schools. Dr. Clint Heacock writes, quote, it was a Generation Joshua update to the dominionist mindset that installing Christian teachers and administrators in a government school could transform it into a Christian school, end quote. First Person points out that Mike Farris also founded parentalrights.org that is now headed by Will Estrada. Parental rights is a term being used by the right to undermine LGBTQ rights across this country. In our webinar, This Year and Next in Anti-LGBT Advocacy, panelists described where we could see parental rights being used to undermine LGBTQ rights. Brennan Son of Media Matters said, quote, there is a lumping in of trans rights, particularly for kids, including athletes and healthcare, with these broader issues, including masks and including so-called critical race theory. They're putting all of these under the umbrella of parental rights to have your kid be the gender that you want them to be and to not have your kids be exposed to whatever explicit materials they will say, and it has been successful for them, end quote. Mike Farris not only founded the HSLDA and parentalrights.org, but is also the CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom, an organization serving at the front lines of the Christian rights efforts to redefine religious freedom and insert its anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice agenda into every element of government and society. PRA's work extensively covers the ADF's work to undermine LGBTQ rights in the United States. First Person did what the New York Times repeatedly does, platformed a powerful organization without questioning the agenda that it has behind it. The Christian rights agenda to take over education in the US is heightening and is undermining the rights for marginalized communities. As we see increases in challenges to LGBTQ rights, like the Parental Rights in Education bill in Florida, and challenges to racial education, it becomes important to look to these organizations backing these movements and what we can do to challenge them. Learn more at politicalresearch.org.